Hey guys, what's going on? It's Steve, Nozilla. Haven't done a video in a little while. I have some footage of the showcasing company Englishtown Raceway meet that I was at. It was last weekend. I'm going to upload that soon. But again, sitting out here in the garage, dealing with fuel issues, and this is all, I guess, still just me learning, continuing to learn about fuel systems. And I am always happy to share information that I get with everybody else because my fuel setup is not like a typical setup, and with that becomes atypical problems as well. So again, I find myself sitting here learning new things today, and it's an amazing feeling, and I want to share that with you. So you all know that I want mechanical fuel pump. PRP offered a cam-driven Kinsler setup that had their integrated trigger system in it. And I saw this, and I know a little bit about mechanical pumps at the time, and I know that they're generally, related to like a lot of drag cars and older muscle cars running, carbureted systems on low pressure fuel setups. But there was also a lot of research and reading that I did about these things, and didn't really see any reason why we couldn't put them on a track car. And being what they are, you can clearly see the advantages of them as you can scale, your fuel almost up to whatever you need and more, and just basically all you need is a fuel pressure regulator that's up to the task. So my Kinsler 700 series, I think it's rated at somewhere around like 2,000 wheel horsepower of fuel. Obviously, as I've discussed before, like this car will most likely never see 2,000 wheel horsepower. It will see 1,000 wheel horsepower easy though. But it's always nice to have a little room to breathe, as long as oversizing something doesn't create additional problems for you. So that being said, I installed the Kinsler setup on the cam. I did a video of it. It looks great. It works great. I got a new FCST from Radium to put in my Radium 11-gallon fuel cell that's specifically made for external pumps. I plumbed up all my lines, all the hard lines and everything that I had used. A lot of them carried over, but we had to make a couple extra to set up for the mechanical setup. And we started the car up that first day, and it started right up and it ran. I noticed that it took a couple extra cranks, to get the fuel pressure up, which was something that I was expecting. A few days later, I had the car out for a drive. Started right up, went out, parked it at Dunkin' Donuts, went in, got a coffee, hung outside for maybe 10 minutes, and then went to go start up my car, and boom, nothing. Crank, 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 crank. No fuel pressure. So ended up having to get the car towed back to my house. Luckily, I was towed by me on my trailer. I had a buddy come by and watch the car while I grabbed my truck. So that's when I learned about low pressure, especially when the car is hot. The mechanical pump doesn't have enough suction or siphoning power to draw fuel from the tank when it's hot. So what I did at that point was I added a one-way check valve in the line, the supply line, right after the filter, and this helped quite a bit. So now the majority of the time that I saw when I was driving the car, even under hot starts, it was doing okay. Still haven't put that many miles in the car. I haven't driven it much, but there was a few trips that I actually made over to my mom's house in the car, believe it or not, to drop some things off to her. And it was 2 trips actually that stuck out because she has a driveway that's got a bit of a slope to it. And anyhow, I went up the driveway, I parked at the top, and went inside, helped her out for a bit, 15-20 minutes or so. These were the car was fully warm and it was a relatively hot day. And I go outside and I go to start the car up and crank it over, and nothing. It's like the same thing that happened to me at the last Dunkin' Donuts store that I just told you. So this had me scratching my head a bit, and I was thinking to myself, okay, well, I'm not making fuel pressure at all while the car is heat soaked. So there must be, a vapor lock in the system, or the fuel is getting too hot and it's not able to draw it through. The check valve had worked before, so I decided that adding a priming pump would be the next step. So what I did was, on my FCST in the radium fuel cell, I have two pickup ports. I have a primary and a secondary. So I added another line, with a fuel sock on it coming up out of the secondary fuel pickup, and I put a separate hard line going out to a external fuel pump, external electrical fuel pump that I could switch on via a rocker switch to prime my fuel system whenever I wanted to. And let me tell you, that worked like a charm. So go to start my car up, cold or hot, flip the switch. I see 43 psi on my digital IC7 display. Press the button and the car starts right up just like it was on an electrical pump. So that is perfect. So now we're moving along to more fuel issues. So this was now great. I felt pretty confident about the car. My future brother-in-law comes up to visit, and of course, we end up going out for a drive in the car because it's why not? He wants to see what the car can do and stuff. So we go out and we take a drive and have some fun. And I drove it a little bit, gave it some juice and stuff like that, and it felt pretty good. Went and parked it, and I come back the next day and I go to start it up, and it's misfiring. And I think I did a video on this too. So why is it misfiring? So we eventually determined that it was misfiring because it had a clogged injector. So what I did was I called up my good buddy Hans Schlieb from HXC Performance, and he sent me a new set of ID 1700s, which will ultimately go in the white GTR behind me. I knew I was going to have to buy another set of injectors for it anyway, so I figured I would just get the same set of injectors, and I sent the clogged ones out to ID to get cleaned and flow tested. And they did send them back to me, and they reported that one of the injectors looked like it had a bit of a clog in it. So they fixed everything up, they replaced all the internal filters, and they sent them back. Great. So now I have the new injectors in the car, and after speaking with Hans about my issue and about what fuel and stuff that I was running, he taught me that when you're running ethanol, you need to run a very fine filter. Otherwise, you're going to have issues with clogged injectors. So I had been running E85 pump, and I've been running E98 on the dyno. So again, I learned another great piece of information about the sizing of fuel filters for different fuels. So previously, I'd been running a 100 micron filter. So at the time that I put the new fresh injectors in here, I also replaced the fuel filter inside the radium fuel filter with I believe it's a 6 micron microglass filter. So got all that set up. The car's back to running great, and some time went by because there wasn't really a lot of time to drive it, and I was working on other things. But this past weekend, I did get an opportunity to take it out a little bit. And in fact, I drove it, for a fairly decent ride, probably a good hour or so, half an hour each way. And I started to notice something. And this is why we're sitting here today again talking about this still. So what I noticed was once the car was up to temp, and mind you, these were two very hot days that I drove it. It was well into the mid 90s, maybe 100 into heat index. Car fully heated up, and I noticed that once that it got heated up to that temp and it was soaked a bit with the heat, I could drive the car and maintain base fuel pressure, but if I tried to push the pedal down and go into boost, I would lose fuel pressure. So obviously that's pretty dangerous because, you know, if you start losing fuel pressure as your boost starts rising, that's a recipe for detonation and, you know, for blowing your engine. So obviously we didn't really get it into any more boost after that. We limped her home, and now I'm sitting here scratching my head like, what the hell is going on? What's my problem now? What's the deal with this mechanical fuel pump setup? Why isn't this thing working? So I shot an email out to Radium Engineering, asking them what they thought about the possibility of, you know, maybe if the fuel is getting too hot, or maybe the mechanical pump that I have just isn't up to snuff for siphoning the fuel from the tank from such a far distance, being all the way in the back and the pump's in the front. I was thinking I was going to ask them if they thought it would be a good idea for me to have a front-mounted surge tank, which is something that PRP, you know, from Herman from PRP mentioned in his video about the mechanical fuel pumps. So I asked them about that, and I also shot an email out to Kinsler, figuring that Kinsler would probably have the most information on this and would probably be able to answer any issues, you know, that I was having intelligently. And they got back to me this morning, and they certainly gave me some answers. So they wanted to know my entire fuel system, soup to nuts, and I gave it to them. And he immediately responded back, and he said that my fuel filter, being a 6-micron filter in the suction line of for the pump, is creating a gigantic restriction and is probably creating a lot of heat. So what he recommended was that I place my filter in the pressure side of the pump, but also have, like, go back to the 100-micron filter, you know, right after the pickup. So I think for right now, what I'm going to do is I want to have the car be in a drivable state, and obviously there's a lot of things that have to happen to this before it gets back in the dyno. I know we talked about getting it back in the dyno, but these fuel issues have set me back, and I'm at a point now where we're in late August. I got a big show coming up this weekend, a couple more shows after that. I would love to get the car out on the track. I'd love to get to the dyno, but it's looking like if I want to get the Samsonite transmission in and get my dry sump installed, I mean, we're looking at like September, October, November here, you know, maybe even next year. So whatever, that's all fine and good. So we'll get the car back to a drivable state, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop the 100 micron stainless filter back in. The car's on pump gas right now, 93, so that should be well up to snuff for that setup. We're just going to have to keep it off ethanol until we're ready to go. But it's in a good state right now, and I think it'll be safe to drive, and we can enjoy it a little bit, at least for the time being. And who knows, maybe I'll actually end up driving it down to Atlantic City. We'll see about that, considering the fact that continuing along with the car troubles, my tow vehicle actually, just the transmission kind of shit the bed on me coming back from New Jersey from the last show. So I think it might be time to get a vehicle that's up to snuff. This is a 1500, so maybe we'll go up to like a 3/4 ton or something after this. But anyhow, so mechanical fuel pumps require check valves, they require priming pumps, they require the fuel filter being the proper size for your fueling after the pump, not on the suction side, on the pressure side. These are all interesting things that you know, you don't really know about until you're in the heat of it, in the thick of it, and you're discovering them yourselves. So I'm glad that I could share this information with you, and I'm going to swap this filter out right now, and we'll go out for a test drive this week when we get some nice weather, and I expect some good results. On a side note, I also was able to figure out what was going on with the fuel level sensor in my car, and I believe now that that's fully hooked up and configured properly with the IC7, which makes me happier than a pig in shit, because I'm really tired of driving around not knowing how much fuel I have in my tank. So that was really good. What else is going on? So we got that going on. I had a battery voltage issue on the IC7 reporting. I got that figured out. Turns out my wideband, my CAN wideband for the Haltech was plugged into my CAN hub, and it was drawing power from the hub rather than being plugged directly into the harness and drawing power from the harness. So the CAN system itself was having a draw on that from the O2 sensor. So that's been resolved. Car is running great otherwise. Heating, there's no problems with overheating or anything like that. I finally did get around to installing my oil cooler. So I have that, I got a relatively large size cooler mounted directly behind the GTR grill in the front. I made some custom mounts for that and ran some 10N, full flow PTFE lines to my remote oil filter block. I think it's got a 185 thermostat on it right now. Did a little bit of a warm-up testing on that yesterday, and looks great. So I'm excited to get it out on the road a little bit and see how that affects oil temps. Mounting it there also with a little bit of ducting in front of the radiator on the top, I believe will give me some fan draw too. So my twin E fans that make like 1700 something odd CFM will be drawing air through the oil cooler as well, which is kind of nice. And then my hood itself is designed so that those two main slits on the front behind the radiator, they vent all the air coming out from the fan. So I'm kind of excited, feeling like I've solved a lot of problems with this car and feeling like it might actually be somewhat roadworthy, which would be a nice change of pace, because if it's roadworthy, then we can take the next steps to getting it track-worthy. So, all right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and do some work on this thing, and we'll report back a little bit later this week. And then we're going to all see you at Atlantic City this weekend for one of the best shows that I've probably ever been to in my life.